presentation that I'll be making Saturday morning at the Illinois Council of Teachers of Mathematics conference, which I'm very much looking forward to doing.
Matt, I hate to pause you. I know you're on a roll. Apparently I've started the webinar, but not the broadcast. So.
Okay, so what do you need me to do?
I will hand off to you in about 60 seconds. Some people are still logging on. So
okay.
I will let people log on. I will introduce you very briefly.
Okay.
And then you can do exactly that again, because it was awesome.
Okay, that'll be great.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Sandal Reveluri. I'm a member of the ICTM board, and we welcome you to our latest webinar. Today, we have the privilege of having Matt Larson, who's the current president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, joining us to preview his keynote that he's going to give on Saturday at our annual conference in Peoria. If you have been with us before, the protocol is pretty much the same. You should have a questions box at the right of your screen. If you don't, then there might be an arrow or a green dot or some kind of icon that indicates you can expand things. You can go ahead and submit questions. I will be sort of moderating those questions to have Matt answer before we are done. And if you have any issues, I am putting, this is my low-tech version, I'm putting a number where you can text me if you can't chat me or send me questions some other way. So with that, we have over half of the people we are expecting to join us so far, and so I'm going to hand off to Matt and close my screen so we can focus on him. So Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Nadal. Good afternoon if you're joining us live. If you're watching this at a later time, then good evening, good morning, or happy whatever part of the day it might be. As Sindel said, I'm Matt Larson. I will be with you Saturday morning at the Illinois Council of Teachers of Mathematics annual meeting, which I'm very much looking forward to. My purpose this afternoon in this brief presentation is to really hopefully whet your appetite, sample a little bit of what I'm going to talk about Saturday morning, and a presentation that I entitle Overcoming Obstacles to Make Mathematics Work for Each and Every Student. My goal Saturday morning will be twofold: to provide a brief overview of NCTM's latest significant publication, Principles to Actions. But the twist I'll put on it is I'll look at some aspects of Principles to Actions through the window that parents and others might look at some of those issues, to look at how we might more effectively communicate some of the messages in Principles to Actions to parents and other stakeholders. So, Principles to Actions. The main reason we put Principles to Actions together, and I was a member of the writing team, is that we have been in the standards business now since 1989. In 1989, NCTM published the first set of standards in any curricular area when we published curriculum and evaluation standards for school mathematics. And since then, the whole effort to reform mathematics education and improve student learning has been focused on states implementing, adopting, writing, assessing ever more rigorous state standards. And so that has worked to some degree. If you look at NAEP scores at the 4th or 8th grade level, or overall where ACT or SAT scores are in this country today compared to 1990, in general the trend in terms of student achievement has been up, but there remain significant challenges in terms of access, equity, and empowerment sorts of issues, the sort of conditions we need to create in classrooms to make sure each and every student can be successful. So the large message out of Principles to Actions is that standards themselves are necessary, but they're insufficient. They don't tell us what the essential conditions are that are required to make sure that mathematics works for each and every student. Principles to Actions has 6 principles The first one, teaching and learning, is the heart of the book. It's well over half of the document is focused on 8 research-informed instructional strategies, and then there are 5 supporting principles referred to as the essential elements of effective mathematics programs. So the overarching message is that what you do each and every day as a classroom teacher of mathematics is the most important thing that happens in the classroom. Effective teaching is that non-negotiable core we need to make sure is in place so each and every child can have a successful experience in the mathematics classroom. The reason for this is pretty straightforward. Of all the factors that we control in school, effective teaching has the largest impact on student learning. In fact, having 3 years of effective mathematics teaching can account on average for 35 to 50 percentile points of student achievement. And so the teaching and learning principle says that in an excellent mathematics program, effective teachers engage students in meaningful learning, either individually or collaboratively at different times, to promote their ability to make sense of mathematical ideas and reason mathematics. So I've underlined here the critical phrases. Students are engaged in meaningful mathematics learning to make sense of mathematics and reason mathematically. I mentioned that the teaching and learning principle puts forth 8 research-informed and instructional strategies or practices. I'm often asked, how did the writing team determine these 8? And there was a great deal of discussion about that. Is it 10, is it 12, is it 6? And we settled on these 8 because they are 8 that most reasonable people can agree on, that the literature clearly supports. They're all much more nuanced than appears here and their listing. For example, the first one, establish mathematical goals to focus learning. This is not just about walking into the classroom and putting today's standard or learning target on the whiteboard. What this is, it is in part that, of course, but really it's about making sure that we situate mathematical goals in the larger mathematical horizon, that we're paying attention to learning trajectories or learning progressions, that we're helping students connect each and every day's lesson to the larger, bigger ideas of mathematics. So that's a sample of how that one is deeper than it appears on the surface. Implement tasks that promote reasoning and sense making, use and connect representation, facilitate meaningful mathematical discourse, pose purposeful questions, build procedural fluency from a foundation of conceptual understanding, supporting productive struggle, and eliciting and using evidence of student thinking. I'll talk about some of these in greater detail Saturday morning. As a little sample, let me just talk about building procedural fluency from a foundation of conceptual understanding. So it says in part, effective teachers of mathematics build fluency with procedures, whether that's computation at the elementary level or it's symbolic manipulation at the secondary level, but they do it from this foundation of conceptual understanding. I think I decided to kind of preview this one a little bit because I think it's a critical one that is sometimes misunderstood by the general public. They focus on an overemphasis on understanding and forget that we're still doing procedural fluency. As I like to say when I communicate with parents, and I do a lot of parent meetings and have conversations with parents, notice those first 3 words: build procedural fluency. So we're still doing in school what we've always done, but what we're adding to it is making sure that students have a conceptual understanding of why those procedures work. And so this is one, as I mentioned, causes a fair amount of confusion today. If you go on the internet and you search for, confusing math homework or Common Core standards, you'll see examples of where parents have expressed concerns about some of the mathematics that their children might be bringing home. And so I think what's really critically important here is that we as instructional leaders, as classroom teachers, make sure that we don't confuse an instructional strategy with a mathematical standard and help parents and others also make that distinction and sort that out. So we may, for example, in the check that's been written to school for the lunch account where the parent used the 10 frame to write the numbers, we may use a 10 frame in elementary school to help students build an understanding of 10, but that's not the mathematical standard. That's an instructional strategy. We still certainly want students to be able to write numbers, understand them, but we're trying to build, an understanding of the place value system, and so we will use instructional strategies to help accomplish that. So the phrase I use is when many of our parents were in school themselves, they just learned how to do something. But today our goal is for students to learn how, why, and when to use it. So we're adding the why and the when to what we do in the mathematics classroom. We're broadening our instructional goals to help better serve students for the world they're going to live in. And so we need to make sure that we're emphasizing visual representations or models to build understanding, what you see on the right, the open array model for 2 times 2-digit multiplication. But that's just a strategy to build an understanding of a traditional approach. And so, I advise that we don't use language like alternate or different or new algorithms because those are sometimes red flag words for some people. And I think connected to this is the importance, and I'll talk more about this, particularly at the elementary level, of how we deal with the homework issue. And we need to emphasize that it's not parents' responsibility to do math homework. And in fact, that can do more harm than good if the parent happens to have anxiety, him or herself. But the parents certainly have a role in math homework, and that role is to support student perseverance, monitor progress, ask questions. Do you have homework today, and have you got it done? Do you have questions? Can you go back to school tomorrow and ask about those sorts of things? And then this is all connected to productive perseverance. And notice I call it productive perseverance. I don't call it productive struggle. I think when we talk about productive struggle, too many people only hear the word struggle and they don't hear the word productive. So instead, I think what we want to emphasize today is the importance of learning from our mistakes, that learning mathematics is not a lot different than learning history or learning how to read. We're going to make mistakes, and mistakes are an opportunity to learn, to get that corrective feedback, try a different strategy, expend a little bit of effort, and continue to make progress. And I happen to have an image up here of LeBron James and Taylor Swift because I think most adults completely agree with the concept of productive struggle or productive perseverance as long as you're applying it to athletics or music. I mentioned that there are 5 supporting elements of effective math programs: access and equity, curriculum, tools and technology, assessment, and professionalism. I have a box around access and equity, assessment, and professionalism because those are the 3 that I'll touch on Saturday morning in my remarks. I don't think I'll have time to talk about curriculum or tools and technology. I do want to say something right now about the access and equity principle. So as it's written in Principles to Actions, it states that an excellent mathematics program requires that all students have access to high-quality math curriculum, effective teaching, high expectations, and the support they need to maximize their learning potential. What I want to say about this is NCTM has a renewed focus and effort around access and equity. In fact, we don't refer to it as access and equity anymore. We now refer to it as access, equity, and empowerment. Using the phrase empowerment to capture the important concepts of student identity, agency, and teaching mathematics for social justice. When we wrote Principles to Actions, these were concepts that did not get the coverage and treatment in Principles to Actions that they should have or deserve to have. I do want to point out that NCTM is in the process of publishing a series of what we call elaborations books, or putting the principles into action for further support of these concepts. And there will be one on access, equity, and empowerment where we look at this topic in a great deal more depth. My October President's Message has a great deal more information on NCTM's renewed focus on access, equity, and empowerment as well, and outlines the specific actions that NCTM is taking around access, equity, and empowerment. We've joined a number of other professional mathematics organizations in a year-long effort to really refocus around this and to make a difference for student learning in the classroom. The way I like to phrase it is much of NCTM's work is traditionally focused on making sure each and every student has access to high-quality curriculum instruction, but we haven't always equally paid attention to how students experience that mathematics in the classroom, and it's that direction that we're focusing on now, as well as mathematics for social justice. And so I will kind of summarize my talk on Saturday by talking about the whole change process and the fact that change often seems and feels overwhelming. You know, it's kind of like, man, we go through this over and over again all the time. And I'll ask the question, why does change seem so hard in what we do? And the reality is that I believe change in mathematics education, change in education in general, is more challenging than it is in many other professions, and that the reason for that is that teaching is a cultural activity, meaning we largely teach the way we teach because that's the way we've always taught. And cultural activities, by their very nature, as Stigler and Thompson have written, are resistant to change. And so that does make it more challenging for us as mathematics teachers to change our practice and to get parents and other stakeholders to accept that change and move forward. And so we're caught in what is sometimes referred to as a cultural trap, meaning that we're still doing some things in the mathematics classroom the same way we did 50, 100, or even 200 years ago. And some of those things that we're still doing once upon a time worked pretty well for a large segment of our student population, but today don't work very well at all, but they somehow persist. And so those practices are maladaptive. I'll talk about an example of one of those, in my opinion, maladaptive practices, and how we can overcome that. And so, you know, much of what I'll talk about comes from principles to actions, those 6 guiding principles that NCTM believes constitute the foundation of a high-quality mathematics education. I will make the point that we know what makes a difference. As Schmoker has written, it's critical that schools learn the lesson that best practice is rarely new, that the most effective actions are well known, but they have that added dimension that those effective practices are constantly reinforced, constantly improved upon, and they're carried out day in and day out, just relentlessly. And so I think that best practice is largely summarized in principles to actions, and the pieces that we didn't have room in that document to expand upon, we will in the forthcoming elaboration series. As I mentioned, one of those books would be around the topic of access, equity, and empowerment. And so I'll try to end on a positive note, and it is my firm belief that effective teachers and leaders really do truly believe that success and failure in student learning is about what we do as teachers or leaders. We look in the mirror and we ask ourselves, did what I did in the classroom today, did it make a difference for my students? And if I didn't, how can I improve upon that? That we are the change agents and that we can successfully help each and every one of our students be more successful in the mathematics classroom. So that's a a sample of what I intend to talk about Saturday morning in my keynote. And again, I really want to thank George and Sendel for the invitation to be at the Illinois Council of Teachers of Mathematics annual meeting. It's one of the highlights of being NCTM president, it's the opportunity to visit many annual state meetings, and certainly Illinois is a critical one because of the large number of NCTM members we have from Illinois. So really looking forward to it. And with that, I think Sindel is going to facilitate, see if we have any questions that I may or may not be able to respond to.
I would be happy to start us off. I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and ask a question first. You mentioned that teaching is a cultural practice, and you also mentioned that you talk a lot with parents. I was wondering, what have you found effective in talking with parents to kind of surface that the way that we think of math in this country as learners, but also as teachers and as parents, that might be cultural, and maybe contrast it beyond the analogies with sports or with music?
Yeah, when I talk to parents, and when I think anybody talks to parents, I think the first thing we have to do is find common ground and agreement. And we all want our children to be successful in the classroom. When I say our children, I mean your children as parent or our children as students in the classroom. And acknowledge that we still have the same goal we had when parents were in school, the how of mathematics, but we're adding to it the why and the when, because there simply aren't jobs for students who can only do the how anymore. Those routine sort of operations have been replaced by machines. But when I talk about, and you mentioned the whole cultural thing, I think our challenge is that it goes clear back to the founding of the country. The first major U.S. math book was called Arithmetic. The author was Nicholas Pike, and in that particular math text, he said that, or he recommended, I should say, that the teaching process is, state a rule, a definition, a formula, show students an example of that rule or formula, and then have students practice problems that look just like that. And for most parents, that's the sort of math instruction they experienced. It's the sort of math instruction many of us experienced when we were students ourselves. But I think what we have to emphasize is that just doesn't serve our students well today. For example, those students who are in kindergarten today, the vast majority of them, by the time they graduate from high school or college or technical school, when they go to work in their career, they're going to go to work in some sort of profession, job that doesn't even exist today. As I like to point out, when we were in school ourselves, none of us sat around with each other and said, when I grow up, I want to be a mobile app developer. No one knew that there was going to be such a job. And so that's why we have to give our students the conceptual understanding of mathematics and the ability to apply and draw on their procedural proficiency and their understanding of mathematics so that they can solve, often collaboratively together, problems that they've never seen before, because those are the sort of skills that are valued today. This ability to think critically, to problem solve, to take on tasks that are not routine and that have not been seen before. And I think when you talk about mathematics that way, many parents and adults understand that because they've seen the way their job has changed. And many adults are not working the same job or even the same career that they started out in because of the rapidly changing nature of our economy. But I also emphasize, and I want to say that I think it's equally important, that mathematics is not just about serving college and careers, that we want students who can think critically and quantitatively so that they can understand better and more deeply the issues that confront us in our daily lives and us as a society, because many of our problems and issues today are couched in mathematical terms. They're put in quantitative situations, and unless students have a deep understanding of mathematics and ability to draw upon it, it's unlikely that they'll be able to understand these issues, understand the recommendations that people in power are making, and or confront those recommendations if they don't really make sense. So I think the reasons we teach mathematics, the reasons we need to emphasize understanding and problem solving in addition to procedural fluency go well beyond just college and career readiness, economic preparation. That it's also a part of ensuring that we have a vibrant and effective democracy in society today. That was a long response to your question, Sandal, but there it is.
I hope people found it valuable. I did. One related question that came in was around homework, and the question was, how do you recommend that we as teachers design homework so that both students and parents understand what we're asking students to do? And I would add maybe why.
So let me start with the why. I mean, why do we have homework? And so I don't even like to call it homework anymore. I like to call it independent practice. And the reason I like to call it that is because I think everyone can understand that whatever it is you do, if you get good at it, you practice. It doesn't matter, you know, if that's a hobby you have in your personal life. It doesn't matter if you're trying to improve you know, at some athletic thing or some thing in the arts. Getting good, getting proficient requires some practice, and certainly learning mathematics is no different. Now, how you help parents varies a little bit on the age of the student. What I might recommend at the elementary level would be a little bit different than what I would recommend at the high school level. I do think one of the things that's critical, particularly at the elementary level, where parents are more likely to want to engage with their child and provide help on the homework, is that we need to show parents the strategies we use in school today so that they understand them. My experience has been when you show parents the strategies we use in school, they become much more supportive of those strategies. Oftentimes when I will show strategies at a parent meeting, I'll have parents say things like, "Oh my God, I get it now." And when they do that, I recognize that their math experience didn't emphasize understanding, and so they appreciate the fact that they understand what their child is learning in school. So that's one thing we can do. But I also think we have to be reasonable about it, and that we shouldn't send home tons of problems for students at the elementary level to practice that are unfamiliar to parents unless we've shown them the strategies. I think we also need to emphasize that children do not have to become proficient with 3 or 4 strategies to do something. That is not the goal of teaching multiple strategies. The goal of teaching multiple strategies is to compare and contrast and build a deeper understanding of an efficient strategy that each and every child can understand for him or herself and use. We need to recognize that it doesn't matter what strategy a child uses as long as he or she understands it. And so we don't need to have specific instructions to say solve these 20 problems using strategy A and solve these 20 problems using strategy B. That we need to be more flexible and reasonable as well and help make that homework comprehensible both for children and for parents. And finally, though, we have to talk about parents about the fact that the homework is not their responsibility to do. It is for their child. We're not interested in whether you can develop mastery of 4th grade math at age 35. We're interested, you know, if your 5-year-old can do that, for example. So there are lots of things to tackle with respect to the homework issue, but those are some.
So Yeah, a couple people were also asking about your mention of maladaptive strategies in particular, and they're wondering if you were willing to say more about that now, or if that's being saved for Saturday.
Well, let me put that out there as a teaser, and I'll say more about that on Saturday. How's that?
Okay. Related to that, apparently a number of pre-service teachers are listening to us right now, and I was wondering if you have any particular advice for folks who are not yet teaching or will be starting or have just started teaching from your perspective.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that I think it's great that pre-service teachers are listening now, and look forward to seeing you on Saturday. I'll get my own commercial plug in here. If you're a pre-service teacher, on Saturday I'll give you a code for a discount for a student NCTM membership. So yet another reason to be there Saturday morning. So look, my advice to beginning teachers is to the most important thing you can do when you get your own classroom is to collaborate with the other teachers in your setting who either teach the same grade level you do or teach the same subject you do. A true professional teacher of mathematics, in fact we have the professionalism principle in Principles to Actions, and in part what that professionalism principle says is that as professionals we collaborate with one another, we are not isolated in our practice, that we plan together. We have this cycle that I recommend works. The cycle is by unit of instruction, where we really are working together to plan our instruction, think about how we can continually improve our practice, how we can support one another, how we'll respond when students happen to struggle, that we will engage with one another and find a way to observe one another teach and get feedback from one another, that really when you get that first classroom, it's just the beginning of your learning experience, but one that hopefully you'll engage in collaboratively with your colleagues, again, at your grade level or who teach the same course you do.
Thank you. I know some people have to go soon. We do have a few more questions. I encourage you to bring those questions and any others to Matt in person on Saturday. Before we go, I just wanted to remind everyone of a couple little things. Hopefully you can see what I'm trying to show you. Matt, can you see it?
I can see it.
Oh, great. Okay. So just wanted to thank you for being here. Wanted to remind you that ICTM's members and their support, including their dues, help make efforts like these possible. And also to implore you to complete the survey that we hope will pop up as soon as you log off of this webinar. It should only take you a few minutes, but it's really helpful to improve our offerings. And we will see you again soon, of course, this Friday and Saturday at the annual conference. You can still register online. But also we will be planning more webinars in the months to come. And so in addition to the survey, we'd love your feedback about how the webinars you've attended so far have gone, any suggestions you have for improving them or for future topics or presenters. You can email me, that's my email address, or you can contact ICTM through any other people or channels that you have. So thanks so much again for joining us, and thanks especially to Matt. And we will look forward to seeing everyone who can make it in Peoria in just a few days.
Thank you.